This is Hitler. No one likes Hitler, and this included some of his very own officers. And in 1944, they would try to kill him. I'm Redcoat Histories, and this is Operation Valkyrie. Resistance to Hitler didn't just begin in 1944. It had started long before that. The Abwehr, under the leadership of Wilhelm Canaris and Hans Oster, had been a particularly disloyal element within the war effort, frequently engaging in plots to disrupt it. Oster began recruiting agents from all across Germany into the resistance, including one Friedrich Albrecht. This was a particularly good find because it was his job to draw up a plan to mobilize reserve units in order to stabilize Germany in the event of civil unrest caused by either Allied bombings or a nationalist uprising. This plan was called Operation Valkyrie, and it would soon become the backbone for a plan to overthrow Hitler's government. Albrecht himself also began recruiting agents. This included men such as Ludwig Beck, Claus von Staufenberg, who will be very important later, even the notorious General Erwin Rommel, although his involvement is up for debate. Most importantly for now, he recruited Major General Henning von Tresckow. He, along with Albrecht, began modifying Operation Valkyrie into a plan to do a coup on Hitler. The plan was that they would somehow kill Hitler, after which the reserve army would be mobilized by Operation Valkyrie. It would then be issued orders to seize control of public buildings all across the Reich, disarm SS units, and arrest Nazi officials. Blame for Hitler's death would be placed on high-ranking party members by issuing an order to all the military districts, beginning with "The Führer Adolf Hitler is dead. An unscrupulous clique of party leaders alien to the front has killed Hitler." It was an ambitious plan, and it was also a highly risky one, especially considering the fact that the only person who could initiate it was General Friedrich Fromm, as he was the head of the reserve army, and thus the only one capable of issuing orders to it. Fromm, while certainly not a Hitler loyalist, was only willing to carry out a coup if Hitler was actually dead, and the coup had a 100% chance of success, as he didn't want to get executed for treason if it failed. This will be a very significant plot point later, trust me, so if the plan was so dangerous, why even bother? Well, there were a range of reasons why these military men wanted Hitler dead. Let's start with a summary of Germany's military situation in 1943. It was bad. Germany had just lost an entire army in the Battle of Stalingrad. The British and Americans were winning hands down in North Africa, and nothing else was going well. This led many people to one of two conclusions. Number one, Hitler was a bumbling idiot who needed to be removed in order to save the war effort. And number two, Germany's situation from here and onward was only going to get worse. And if they wanted to extract any sort of favourable peace deal, they better try to negotiate one as soon as possible. But negotiation with Hitler in power seemed impossible, as the Allies had just issued the Casablanca Declaration, stating that they would only accept unconditional surrender from Germany. The conspirators believed that they could change this. They believed that if they were able to just kill Hitler, Allies may have some sympathy for them, drop their demand of unconditional surrender, and let Germany get away with at least some gains from the war. There was a bit of disagreement as to what exactly an ideal post-war outcome would be. On the lighter end of the spectrum, you had some who would have liked to see Germany simply be able to return to its 1914 borders. On the more extreme end of the spectrum, you had some that wanted the following. Germany annexes all German-speaking parts of Central Europe. Germany annexes Poland. Germany gets her overseas colonies back. Germany gets to keep all their gains in the East. Germany continues the war against the Soviet Union and possibly gets some Allied assistance. While disgust at atrocities committed by the Nazis did play some part in their motivation, it was far from their primary concern, as they were far more concerned with preserving Germany's hegemony over Europe. So how did they actually try and assassinate him? Well, in February of 1943, Hitler decided to visit the Army Group Center headquarters, and our good friend Tresckow came up with three potential ways to kill him. Number one, the Cavalry Honor Guard. This was a unit that had been deliberately packed with anti-Hitler officers. The plan was to use this unit to ambush Hitler's car somewhere in the forest, defeat his SS guards, and finally shoot the man himself. However, this option was turned down, as it would involve German soldiers dying and not just Hitler. Number two, just shoot him. This was by far the simplest plan, as it involved someone simply standing up in the middle of the meal he was to have with the officers and shooting him dead. However, this option was also rejected, as it was widely believed that Hitler wore a bulletproof vest at all times, and it also just felt like cheating. And number three, bomb his plane. The plan was to smuggle a time bomb onto Hitler's plane back to Berlin. It would blow up mid-flight and Hitler would be toast. This one was attempted attempted. The bomb was successfully placed onto the plane under the disguise of a parcel for one of Tresckow's friends. However, it was placed in an unheated storage unit on the plane, meaning that the percussion cap that was supposed to set off the bomb just never went off. So when Hitler landed, he was perfectly fine. Okay, so that was a major missed opportunity. But in March, they had yet another shot at killing Hitler, as he was due to go and visit a new display of Soviet equipment in the Berlin Military Museum. The plan was that a guy called Colonel Gersdorf would stick a time bomb into his coat for the visit, and just before Hitler was about to leave, it would explode, killing everyone. So the day rolled around and everything was seeming to go according to plan. However, Hitler, instead of having his planned 10-minute visit, whizzed through the museum in around 2 minutes, and was long gone before the bomb had any chance to explode. And Gersdorf was only just about able to defuse the bomb before it was too late. Right, well, that was a near disaster that also didn't work. They had yet another attempt to blow up Hitler in November 1943, when he was due to inspect the new army winter uniforms. The soldier chosen to model the uniforms volunteered to stick a landmine into his backpack, and same drill as usual, blow everyone up. However, the train carriage that contained the new uniforms got blown up in an Allied air raid, meaning that the meeting was cancelled. Captain Ewald von Kleist offered to do basically the exact same thing later. However, this meeting also got cancelled. Finally, in March 1944, Field Marshal Ernst Bucher decided, you know what, screw it, let's just shoot him in the head. So he got one of his subordinates, Captain Eberhard von Breitenbach, probably didn't pronounce that correctly and I don't care, to carry a gun into a meeting with Hitler in order to shoot him. But once again, their plans were foiled at the last minute, because Hitler decided to exclude junior officers from the meeting, meaning that Breitenbach wasn't going to be able to get in there with his gun. All of this failure certainly did nothing to motivate the conspirators, and after the 6th of June 1944, any further attempts at deposing Hitler seemed completely pointless, because D-Day had just happened. The Allies had taken Normandy and had begun reconquering large swaths of occupied France, meaning that there was most likely no chance of a negotiated peace, as the Allies were now winning even harder. Many of the conspirators began questioning if there was even any point to attempting a risky operation to assassinate Hitler and depose his government. After all, the war was probably going to be over fairly soon anyways, and at this point there was no chance of Germany extracting even remotely favourable peace terms. However, after being rallied by the words of Henning von Tresckow, they concluded that they needed to attempt the operation even if it was ultimately pointless, simply for the sake of showing the world that they were willing and capable of doing so. On top of this, the resistance were about to receive a stroke of luck, because on July 1st, one of their most active and motivated members, Claus von Staufenberg, was promoted to Chief of Staff by Friedrich Fromm. Because he was now a senior officer, this meant that he was now able to attend meetings with Hitler in person, making him the perfect man to assassinate him. Staufenberg caught wind that Hitler was holding a meeting in his bunker in East Prussia, the Wolf's Lair. Thus he, along with fellow conspirator Werner von Haeften, decided to attend this meeting, along with some plastic explosives. The plan was that they were going to leave the explosives in the room with Hitler, blow him sky high, and then inform the other conspirators of his death and thus initiate Operation Valkyrie. So they set off, and arrived at the Wolf's Lair for the first time on the 14th of July. And they would have attempted the assassination there and then if it wasn't for one big issue. Hitler was there, but Himmler and Göring were not, and it was seen as pointless to kill Hitler if they didn't also kill his two most likely successors. So the plan for that day was aborted. Another meeting was held on the 15th of July, and this time everything was going to plan. Hitler was there, Himmler was there, Göring was there, everyone important was there. So he set up the bomb, planted it in a briefcase, and started the timer. But at the last minute, Hitler decided to leave the room in order to attend to some other business, and thus the bomb had to be quickly defused in order to prevent a disaster. Things were really not looking well for the two conspirators, and they once again had to fly back to Berlin with their tails between their legs. Worse yet, rumours soon reached Staufenberg that the Gestapo were onto him, and while probably not true, it did put a sense of urgency into his mind, making him conclude that next time he had a chance to kill Hitler, he would take it no matter what, Himmler or no Himmler. And next time came much sooner than expected, because on the 20th of July, time, he was once again invited to attend a conference with Hitler. So he and Haften once again packed their things, and hopefully for the last time, set off for East Prussia to kill Hitler, no matter the cost. They arrived at around 10 AM, were greeted by Hitler, and began to wait. The conference was scheduled to start at 12:30, so shortly before then, Staufenberg asked if he could leave in order for him to change his shirt. So he and Haften went off into a side room together and began assembling the bomb they brought. However, due to Staufenberg losing most of his fingers while fighting in Tunisia, this turned into a rather lengthy process, which caused one of the officers to get fed up waiting for them. So he wandered over to the room they were preparing in, and
Yeah, that wire there.
yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, that's good.
Would you idiots hurry up? The meeting's about to start already. My goodness, how long does it take for a man to change his shirt? Dude. Fortunately for them, the officer saw nothing, but his presence alone was enough to scare the pair of them into changing the plan a bit. You see, they were originally going to use 2 bombs. For the sake of time, they decided to scrap that and only assembled the one, a decision which will have dire consequences later. So they placed the bomb in a briefcase and wandered over to the meeting room, entered, greeted Hitler, and took their seats. Staufenberg activated the timer and placed the briefcase containing the explosives under the oak table in the center of the room, right next to Hitler. Then the meeting started and continued for a while until Staufenberg received a planned phone call as an excuse for him to leave the room. So he and Haften got up, mumbled some sort of an excuse, and left the room. Now all they had to do was wait. The explosion was huge, and Staufenberg was now thoroughly convinced that Hitler was dead. So, he and Haften hopped into their staff car and whizzed off, bluffed their way through 3 checkpoints to escape the Wolfschanze, and booked it down the road to Rastenburg airfield, before hopping on the plane and flying off to Berlin to meet up with the other conspirators. He landed at around 1600 and called the Bendler block in order to tell them the good news. Hitler was dead. The coup can go on. But thinking about it, did he actually see the body? Was Hitler actually dead? Yeah. Staufenberg had placed the bomb right next to Hitler, but one of the other officers in the meeting had kicked the briefcase behind the leg of the thick oak wood table, meaning that it took most of the impact, and Hitler was shielded from the blast. He had perforated eardrum, conjunctivitis, singed trousers, but was otherwise completely fine. If Staufenberg had the time to arm the second explosive, things would have been very different. Anyways, quick side note, Italian fascist leader Benito Mussolini, of all people, was due to show up at the Wolf's Lair about an hour later, and so he did. And so there are all these great photos of him wandering around the room as if he has a thought bubble coming out of his head saying,
Mamma mia, what is this? I don't like how you decorate the place. What is this? There are everywhere.
Anyways, back to the main story. Another conspirator that had been placed in the Wolfschanze was General Erich Vielgeibel. I think that's how you pronounce his name, and I don't care to find out. And it was his job to DM the boys back in Berlin as to whether the assassination had been successful or not. So he did just that, and informed them that Hitler was still alive, but also said to go ahead with the coup anyways. This caused a great deal of confusion over at the Bendler block, meaning that they made absolutely no progress on the coup, and wasted valuable time doing so. When Staufenberg landed and told them that Hitler was dead, they decided to go with his testimony and tried to begin the coup. I say tried because there was one big problem. General Fromm. As stated at the start of the video, Fromm only agreed to side with the conspirators if they were guaranteed to succeed. And after being informed by Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel that Hitler had survived, he refused to cooperate with him any further. So General Albrecht, the man that started the whole conspiracy, decided to take matters into his own hands. Literally. He gave the order to execute Operation Valkyrie, fraudulently, in Fromm's name. And immediately the plan began to spring into action. In France, the military governor, Karl Heinrich von Stuttgart, Hauptnagel disarmed and arrested the leadership of the SS in the region. In Berlin, Paul von Hesse began sealing off the government district, capturing Goebbels in his apartment in the process. There were uprisings in Prague, Vienna. All across the Reich, the replacement army was seizing control of the apparatus of state. Apart from the minor detail of Hitler not being dead, everything was seemingly going according to plan. When Staufenberg and Heften arrived at the Bendler block at 1640, they were greeted by Albrecht and one extremely angry General Fromm. He was outraged at Albrecht issuing Operation Valkyrie in his name, as he didn't want to get tied up in any treachery he couldn't get away with, and thus he tried to arrest the three of them for treason. But Staufenberg had a trick up his sleeve. An Uno reverse card, and thus the three of them whipped out their pistols, arrested him, and locked him up in his own room, and replaced him with the much more thoroughly anti-Hitler General Erich Hupner. Now, despite everything that had been going well up until now, there was still obviously one big problem. Hitler wasn't dead, and neither were any of his closest henchmen. Arguably, Hitler's closest henchman, Heinrich Himmler, quickly started taking control of the situation. He quickly began issuing orders countermanding Operation Valkyrie, and informing people all across the Reich of the attempted assassination and Hitler's survival, causing many of the conspirators to lose faith and abandon the plot. It was also around this time that he issued orders to begin a manhunt for Staufenberg, who by now was held to be the most likely person responsible for the bombing. He also began a manhunt for anyone who is watching this and has not yet subscribed to Redcoat Histories. So if you don't want to get arrested by the Gestapo, like, comment, subscribe to the amazing, fantastic, wonderful Redcoat Histories channel, or else you will end up like this poor chap right here. Worsening the situation is the fact that the conspirators failed to capture all the broadcasting stations in Berlin, meaning that the news of Hitler's survival was able to be freely spread across Germany. By 1900, Hitler had recovered from the blast enough to start making calls for himself, and because the conspirators had stupidly forgotten to cut Goebbels' telephone wire, Hitler was able to call him in Berlin, and they proceeded to have a conversation which I imagine went something along the lines of this. Hello? Oh, well, hello, Mr. Hitler. I thought you were dead. Right, so you're not dead. I see. It was also around this time that the officer Otto Ernst Riemer, who had been given the task by Hesse to seal off Goebbels' home, began to question his orders. So he wandered inside to speak to him personally, to which Goebbels responded by handing over the telephone to him. Who are you calling? Oh, no one, just a good friend of mine. Hello? Okay, I'll get right to it. Heil Hitler! Riemer was placed under Hitler's personal command, and was ordered to take his troops and immediately start marching on the Bendler block. So, he and Goebbels quickly went about winning over the rest of the officers surrounding the government district, removed the barricades, and began marching on the Bendler block. Speaking of the Bendler block, let's check up on how the conspirators are faring over there. Oh no. As the night went on, more and more officers within the Bendler bloc began to grow disloyal to the whole conspiracy, after finding out that Hitler was not in fact dead, and they didn't want to get themselves executed for treason. So some of these officers went and freed General Fromm from his room, a move which resulted in fighting breaking out between the loyal and disloyal officers within the building. At 2300, Riemer arrived at the building with his troops, and at this point the fate of the coup was well and truly sealed. The loyal officers were eventually able to beat out the conspirators, and as a result, Staufenberg, Albrecht, and many other conspirators were arrested. Fromm, eager to prove his loyalty to Hitler, quickly held show trials for the conspirators, and as a result, they were all sentenced to death. Stauffenberg, Hafen, and Albrecht were all executed that night, and in the following days and months, thousands more were arrested, tried, and executed. The whole attempted assassination and failed coup was used by the Gestapo as an opportunity to deal with anyone that had shown even the slightest hint of disloyalty to the Nazis, almost like a second Night of the Long Knives, even going so far as to accuse the Pope of playing some part in the conspiracy. And under Himmler's new policy of blood guilt, it was not just the conspirators themselves that were in danger, but their families too. Even General Fromm, despite his best efforts, was not spared from the purge, and was executed on the 20th of July 1944. In order to secure the loyalty of the army going forward, every member of the Wehrmacht was forced to retake their oath of loyalty to Hitler, and the German military salute was replaced with the Nazi one. So the coup was a catastrophic failure. Hitler was alive and now believed that he had been divinely preserved in order to win the war in Germany's name. All the conspirators were either dead or being quickly rounded up, and any potential replacements were being quickly rounded rounded up and imprisoned or executed. Unfortunately for them, Germany was no less Nazi than when they began. But the legacy they left, however, has been much more impactful. In modern Germany, the men involved in planning and executing Operation Valkyrie are now all hailed as heroes that stood up to Hitler's tyranny. And this sentiment is demonstrated by the fact that the street in which Staufenberg was executed is now named after him. I will end this video with the last words of Henning von Tresckow, shortly before he committed suicide in order to avoid capture by the Gestapo. The whole world will vilify us now, but I am still totally convinced that we did the right thing. Hitler is the archenemy not only of Germany, but the whole world. When in a few hours' time I go before God to account for what I have done and left undone, I know I will be able to justify what I did in the struggle against Hitler. God promised Abraham that he would not destroy Sodom if just 10 righteous men could be found in the city, and so I hope that for our sakes, God will not destroy Germany. No one among us can complain about his death, for whoever joined our ranks put on the shirt of Nessus. A man's moral worth is established only at the point where he is ready to give up his life in defense of his convictions.